Those who enjoyed our NBA Eastern Conference preview with some delectable knowledge when it comes to who will finish 1 through 8, well, rejoice. We are here with the Western Conference preview. Before I throw out my card, and of course before you see Andre Snelling's, I will preempt this clip with a very important note. I took a contrarian standpoint, or I guess contrarian point of view, when it came to making my rankings. Because if every single person in the world believes that the Warriors will be the 1 seed, I at least want to have some video evidence that I was the one person, or maybe one of 3 people, who believed that possibly the Spurs were the 1 seed going into this season. So lo and behold, I give you the Western Conference predictions. I have it written down. I probably will be very wrong when it comes to the Warriors being the 2 seed over the Spurs, but I will give you more reasons as to why it could happen. But I'm going to focus on Andre's side of the graphic. We have almost identical teams once again, just in very different orders. Actually, almost not too much difference in the top 4. I believe this year the Western Conference 5 through 8 are extremely difficult to predict because there are so many what-ifs, wild cards, things to keep your eye on throughout the season because one injury to any one player on any team below a 4 seed could derail the entire season, whereas an injury to anybody in the top 3 might not have as great of an impact. So, Andre, Golden State Warriors, San Antonio Spurs, Los Angeles Clippers, not all that surprising. We both have that, again, in just slightly different order. The James Harden point guard led Houston Rockets at the 4. Damian Lillard's Trailblazers at the 5, Russell Westbrook's Thunder at the 6. I ranked the Timberwolves higher than you did, and I'm going to give you a lot of reasons as to why, which I'm sure you'll like. And the Utah Jazz, going back to that NBA, ESPN, Westgate win total, they have the Jazz way up there too. Let's go through this. Let's start with why the Clippers and Rockets are going to finish in the chunk. I think everyone knows at this point why the Spurs and the Warriors will finish in the 1 or 2 region.
Yeah, the interesting thing, just touching briefly on the Spurs, I actually like your prediction because they always fly under the radar. And so I think people forget in the rush that Golden State had 73 wins last year, the Spurs were right there with them.
67 wins and better at home.
Yeah, I mean, and Tim Duncan is, he's an all-timer. Mm-hmm. But the Tim Duncan that retired last year is not as good as Pau Gasol. So the Spurs should be better. I see Gasol fitting into the system. The Warriors, they dropped a bomb on things, They have more top-end talent. Will it work? We'll see. So I could definitely see that Spurs prediction. As to the question you actually asked me, so I'm not like a politician. That next clump of teams, the Clippers are kind of like the swing contending team. Mm-hmm. Like I could see them taking a step up into that, challenging the Spurs Warriors class, but they've been right there for like 3 or 4 or 5 years now, and they haven't taken that step yet. So until they show they can remain healthy and actually compete on that level, I think that 3rd slot is kind of where they are. After that is where it gets interesting to me. I mean, picks 4 through 10 could almost come in any order. I'm surprised that we both had the Rockets at 4. I thought I was actually being bold by moving them up that high because the consensus that I've kind of heard in the general predictions around is that they might be fighting for that 8th playoff spot. And I think the Westgate predictions would say the same. They have them at over and under 43.5. But for me, I feel like last year things went about as bad as they could go for that team.
Yes.
And they still were at about that. They were able to sneak in the 8th playoff slot. I think that though Howard is a good player, he didn't fit there. And I think building a team around James Harden and bringing in Mike D'Antoni to lead it, which means it's really going to be about James Harden, I think that's the best thing that they can do. So that's why I slid them up into that slot.
So what I find so interesting, one, I did not look at your rankings before I made mine. I wanted to make sure that I had at least some form of 1 through 8 before, so I was not skewed by anybody else's decisions. Of course, I was looking at 15,000 other versions of rankings going into the season, but I wanted to make sure that I at least put my 8 together. So when I saw you had the Rockets there, I was like, well, that's not fair. I was going to put the Rockets there. This is ridiculous. Here's the reasoning. It's the same reasoning I put the Raptors as the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. I agree with you on every point you made, especially I think Dwight Howard, not a great fit for that team. D'Antoni's going to make it so much about James Harden and so much more about offense, even though that team was already almost entirely about offense. But the reasoning for me was I've watched James Harden prove that he can carry that team to a 2 seed. So why can't he carry him to a 4 seed when it only got better at the very, very top? And the rest, again, Kevin Durant moving to the Warriors did make the Thunder, should make the Thunder a worse team. So while the Warriors just got better and better and better, the Thunder did not necessarily get better. I'm not sure if the Blazers got a crazy amount better than they did compared to last year. I want to be specific on that. I think they're still a very good team and a playoff team. All right, so the question that I'm going to lead you into next, or I'm going to at least throw out my opinion on the Timberwolves first. Mine entirely revolves around Thomas Joseph Thibodeau Jr. Because, and that is his full name, I believe, because his father was Thomas Joseph Thibodeau Sr. So I was never a big fan of Tibbs on the Chicago Bulls. I was never a big fan of Tibbs as an assistant coach on the Boston Celtics. And the reason I say that is because I do believe over a 5-year window, a 3, 4, 5-year window, his idea of minutes management doesn't exist, and he has the ability to run his team into the ground. And by the time they get to the point where they need to contend, they're always battered, injured, whatever it might be. Part of that could be the injury-prone players he had on the Chicago Bulls. Maybe he's learned something, maybe something new will change. But why are the Timberwolves so high in my book? This guy is 255 and 139 in his career as a head coach. And over the past decade, as an assistant coach defensively, he was phenomenal with guys like Kevin Garnett, who was already a defensively phenomenal player. However, he got Paul Pierce to play the best defense of his life when Tibbs was there. And when he moved to the Bulls weren't allowing people to score ever. They didn't have to score that many points a game to fit those records of 60-win seasons, 55-win seasons. I believe that Karl Anthony Towns is a tremendous player, an MVP-level player, possibly this year, a guy who could easily make the first or second All-NBA team, because as you mentioned in your article when it came to Cat versus Anthony Davis in your video, Karl Anthony Towns is where Anthony Davis was heading into his 3rd year, and Cat's only doing it in his 2nd year. So you have a scorer in Wiggins, you have a defensively sound, bodied-ready point guard in Chris Dunn, and you have a coach who's ready to challenge and has proven that he can be in the top 8, obviously, but I think 5 is the highest that they can get. But why not? Why not put the Wolves at 5? I don't see a reason why they couldn't play better than the Blazers, Thunder, or Grizzlies.
Yeah, no, you preach it to the choir.
That's why I figure you know all this. But
yeah, and I really liked your reasoning, especially about Tibbs, because if you look at the last couple of years, for the Timberwolves, their team has struggled, for obvious reasons, but a lot of it was defensive. Mm-hmm. And last year, even once they started to gel, building around Cat and everybody knowing their roles, their defense is what held them back. And so you end up with these funky, Garnett was only playing 10, 15 minutes a game, mm-hmm. Part of the season for each of the last 2 years. But if you look at it, his on-court plus minus was crazy. It was like, while he was on the court for those minimal minutes, and they were always starters minutes, so they were playing against the other team starters, they were like +7 or something over the last 2 seasons. And then they were negative without him. And it was, I think, entirely because while he was out there, he controlled the defense. Mm-hmm. And Tibbs is going to be controlling the defense like that all the time from the sideline. So I do think that they can get a lot better. And I also really like, you mentioned how Tibbs can run his teams into the ground. I like the depth that the Timberwolves have. Yes. They have young depth. So they're young. And my dad always said young people couldn't get tired. So that helps. And then for 2, they have Dunn, but they also have Rubio at point guard. They have Levine. So the 3 of them can kind of trade off in the backcourt. They've got Wiggins, then they've got Shabazz Muhammad, who's like a solid swing man that can go behind them. And then they've always got several big men. So, I think that this team is ready-made for Tibbs to take to the next level. So, you mentioned 5. I think 4 is not out of range. As we said, after those top 3 teams, I think it's wide open.
Exactly. So what's also an important note when it comes to this Tibbs team versus the Bulls Tibbs team, I think the average age of the team is younger than that of the Bulls. So you just mentioned probably the most important point when it comes to this team. They're younger, faster, and more athletic than the Bulls were. And that's saying a lot because the Bulls were a relatively young and fast and athletic team, especially Derrick Rose before the injuries, was one of the most explosive and most athletic guards in the league, on top of Joakim Noah, who was never the fastest guy, but was always a communicative leader. So I think that they have, it just seems like such a good fit. I'd be shocked if they didn't make the playoffs. I think you having them at the, if we go back to the card for the standings, you have them at the 7, correct? I believe it was?
Yeah.
Which is, again, very, very debatable because, Russell Westbrook, Victor Oladipo, and Steven Adams. I want to talk about the Thunder in this specific part also for this NBA Western Conference preview because Oladipo and Westbrook make up one of the most athletic backcourts in the entirety of the NBA, and Russell Westbrook's numbers, whether you like him by the advanced numbers or not, is still going to put up enough of a fight day in and day out to lead his team. But I think the key, the X factor, is Steven Adams for that team. If he plays like he did in the playoffs last year, a double-double machine, great defensively, and again, using communication to lead the defense, that team could very much finish in the top 6, top 5, or top 4, besides the fact that they have every reason and motivation to, given the fact that they have one of the best home courts, and they have a chip on their shoulder that Durant left. So they want to beat up every team in the league, not just the Warriors.
Definitely. I really like the Thunder. And honestly, like we were saying that I thought I was going out on a limb by putting the Rockets at 4. I really thought about putting the Thunder there. I think they're going to be better than expected. You laid out some of the reasons. I think Steven Adams is on the rise. Talking with some of my basketball nerd friends the other day, and they were all universal. One guy said, am I going out on a limb by saying Steven Adams is their second best player? And then everybody else said, no, I've got him there too. No, me too, me too.
Some of the numbers back that up. I mean, Enes Kanter offensively is definitely up there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I like that they're going to be a perimeter-driven team. I think that works in today's NBA. But in addition to being perimeter-driven, they have big man talent, in Adams, in Kanter. They're going to be able to be strong up front, grab some rebounds, play some rugged defense down low, and then let their perimeter guys provide the excitement and the scoring. So, and as I mentioned, I think in my last Hoops Lab article, there's a legitimate chance that Russell Westbrook might turn into the Incredible Hulk on the court at any given time. And so, I'm not going to count them out for a home court position. No. So I think I have them at 5 on my list. And, anywhere in that upper middle part, I could certainly see them finishing.
I feel like Jazz fans are going to come with their pitchforks. That doesn't exist. Pitchforks for me, because I know the Jazz are better than their roster says they are, than the numbers say they are, and how they competed last year. I think personally, I think the Grizzlies slip into the 8th seed because Conley, Randolph, and Gasol healthy still make up a team that even when they're beat up, find a way to win 42 games in a season. I think the loss of Dave Joerger is a major problem. I know David Fizdale's coming in. He has proven nothing compared to what Joerger's proven, and he's moved over to the Kings. But real quick on the Jazz, they have a lot of interesting pieces with the Stifle Tower. To me, it's the point guard problem. I just don't believe their backcourt has enough to even throw in enough to get a 41-win season. I could be so wrong about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, because I just pointed out that what I like about the Thunder is how their offense is so perimeter driven and their big men can just be big men. I think the Jazz have probably better big men. I mean, I'm very high on Rudy Gobert. And I think that if he's healthy the whole year with his defensive capabilities, they could challenge, if not end up as the number 1 overall defense in the league. I really like Derek Favors too. Mm-hmm. So, with them, I think the question is, can they produce enough offense? And I feel like, honestly, so I put them at the 8th seed. Going back to that Westgate, I think they would have had them at the 4 seed. They set their over-under at 47.5.
So the NBA, ESPN's win projections, I think, had them before the Westgate came out. It was like 49 wins, they thought, 49.2.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Again, what do they know in Vegas, Andre? What aren't they telling us?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? Vegas has made a lot of money over a really long time. They're not always right, but they are worth listening to.
That's very true. They've made a decent amount of money over the past couple of years, probably the past 20 years. That's why we keep going back, though. All right, guys, so leave your top 8 in the comment section below. Give us your hottest take about your top 8. Yeah, the Warriors and Spurs should be battling it out for the 1 seed. The Clippers, who knows, maybe they make a huge jump this year and everything clicks and they can stay healthy. What do you think about
Especially if Garnett joins them?
Especially if Garnett joins them to either play or coach. Who knows? He can still do it. I know he's retired, but he can come back out of it. Like, favorite, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you head over to rotowire.com. Check out Andre's Hoops Lab website, which is also now in the description box below. And we'll see you next time.